The rain hammered the tin roof of the old cabin like a relentless confession, each drop carving deeper into the night. Evelyn Harper clutched the splintered doorframe, her lungs burning from smoke that clawed its way down her throat, as flames licked the walls behind her. "Come on," she rasped to the stranger pinned beneath the fallen beam, their eyes locking in that split-second eternity where life hangs by a thread of sheer will. In that moment, as she heaved the wood aside and dragged the woman into the mud-slicked yard, Evelyn did not know she had just pulled her own fractured heart from the ashes too. That night in the Cascade foothills 12 years ago had been the kind of storm that reshapes everything. Evelyn was 23 then, a wandering artist fresh from the Rhode Island School of Design, chasing inspiration through Oregon's wild backcountry. She had pitched her tent near a remote rental cabin in the Mt. Hood National Forest, drawn by the way the pines whispered secrets to the wind. The fire started small, a forgotten lantern in the cabin's kitchen, but it bloomed into an inferno fed by dry timber and gusts that carried embers like cruel omens. Evelyn smelled it first, the acrid bite slicing through her dreams of canvas and color. She stumbled out into the downpour, barefoot and shivering, her flannel nightshirt plastered to her skin. The cabin glowed orange against the black sky, a silhouette of doom. That's when she heard it, a muffled cry slicing through the roar. No one was supposed to be there. The place had been advertised as vacant for the season. But there she was, the woman inside, coughing and clawing at the door that wouldn't budge. Evelyn didn't think. She grabbed a rusted axe from her truck bed, the one she used for splitting kindling, and swung it with a ferocity born of instinct. Wood splintered, flames roared closer, and then her hands found skin, warm and trembling, pulling the stranger free just as the roof groaned its final surrender. They collapsed together in the mud, the rain washing soot from their faces in rivulets that mimicked tears. The woman was younger, maybe 20, with wild chestnut curls matted and dark from the wet, her hazel eyes wide with shock. She wore a thin sundress incongruous for the chill, as if she'd wandered in from a summer daydream. You saved me," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, fingers digging into Evelyn's arm like she feared the ground might swallow her whole. Evelyn nodded, too winded to speak, her chest heaving as sirens wailed in the distance. Firefighters arrived like ghosts from the mist, wrapping them in wool blankets that smelled of damp earth. In the ambulance's sterile glow, under the flicker of overhead lights, Evelyn learned her name. Riley Voss. A botanist from Vermont, out here on a solo research trip studying rare ferns in the understory. She'd hiked in that afternoon, lost track of time cataloging specimens, and decided to crash in the cabin rather than navigate the trails back to her car in the dark. They didn't talk much that night. Riley was in shock, her hands shaking as paramedics checked for burns. Evelyn sat beside her, silent sentinel, watching the medics work. The fire had taken everything Riley carried. Her notebooks filled with sketches of delicate fronds, her field camera, a locket with a faded photo of her late mother. "It's all gone," Riley murmured once, staring at the foredrip as if it held the weight of her losses. Evelyn reached out, hesitating before covering Riley's hand with her own. The touch was electric, a quiet anchor in the chaos. "You're here," Evelyn said simply. "That's enough for now." In the weeks that followed, as the forest healed with tentative green shoots pushing through charred soil, so did they in fragments. Evelyn extended her stay, renting a room in the nearest town, government camp, a speck on the map where loggers and skiers traded stories over coffee at the local diner. Riley's insurance covered a hotel, but she lingered too, combing the burn site for salvageable remnants of her work. They met by accident at first, crossing paths on the muddy trails, then by choice, sharing meals of canned soup heated over a camp stove. Evelyn painted during those days, her easel set up in a meadow where wildflowers defied the scars. She captured the fire's aftermath in broad strokes of umber and sienna, the way light fractured through smoke-hazed pines. Riley watched sometimes, perched on a stump, her sketchpad forgotten in her lap. "You make the ruin look almost beautiful," she'd say, and Evelyn would laugh, a low sound like distant thunder. "Beauty hides in the breaks. It's where the light gets in." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks in a blaze of crimson, Riley confessed her ghosts. Her mother's death 2 years prior. A slow unraveling from cancer that left Riley adrift, chasing solitude in the wilds to outrun the grief. "I came out here to disappear," she admitted, her voice soft against the cricket chorus. Evelyn understood that ache. Her own father had walked out when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise 3 girls on a seamstress's wages in Providence. Art became Evelyn's escape, her rebellion against the emptiness. "We don't disappear," Evelyn replied, stirring the embers of their fire. "We just learn to carry the dark a little lighter." Their connection deepened like roots seeking water after drought. Shared silences stretched into comfortable rhythms. Mornings foraging for morels in the damp woods. Afternoons debating the poetry of Mary Oliver over thermoses of tea. Riley's laugh was a revelation, bright and unfiltered, cutting through Evelyn's guarded edges. And Evelyn's touch, tentative at first, a brush of fingers while passing a mug, a steadying hand on Riley's back during a sudden storm, ignited something unspoken, a warmth that bloomed in stolen glances. It was on a clear night, stars pricking the velvet sky like scattered diamonds, that they crossed the line from survivors to something more. They lay on a blanket in the meadow, the air thick with pine resin and possibility. Riley turned to Evelyn, her face illuminated by fireflies dancing in the grass. "What if this, the fire, us, was meant to happen?" she whispered. Evelyn's heart stuttered, the vulnerability raw as an open wound. She leaned in, their breaths mingling, and pressed her lips to Riley's in a kiss that tasted of rain and renewal. It was soft, exploratory, a promise forged in the quiet spaces between words. For 3 months they wove their lives together in that fragile idyll. Riley extended her grant. Evelyn postponed her return east. They hiked the timberline trail, hands clasped over crevasses bridged by snowmelt streams. In Evelyn's makeshift studio, Riley posed amid half-finished canvases, her form a study in graceful lines and shadowed curves. Love unfurled like fern fronds in spring, tender and inevitable. "You've lit something in me I thought was dead," Riley said one dawn, tracing the freckles on Evelyn's shoulder as sunlight spilled through the cabin window they'd claimed as their own. But joy, Evelyn would learn, is a fleeting guest in the house of the heart. Riley's funding dried up, pulling her back to Vermont for a teaching post at Middlebury College. "It's temporary," she promised at the airport, her arms fierce around Evelyn. "I'll come back. We build this, you and me." Evelyn nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, believing in the weight of those words. She drove west alone, the Cascades receding in her rearview like a dream dissolving at wake. The letters came at first, thick envelopes filled with pressed leaves and Riley's looping script, recounting New England autumns in hues of amber and rust. Evelyn replied with sketches, watercolors of Oregon's moody coasts where waves crashed like unanswered questions. Phone calls bridged the miles, voices husky with longing, plans whispered for a future stitched from shared dreams. A home in Portland perhaps, with a garden for Riley's plants and a studio for Evelyn's art. Then silence crept in, insidious as fog rolling off the Willamette. Weeks turned to months. Riley's calls grew sparse, her letters curt. Evelyn poured her ache into her work, paintings darkening with motifs of fractured light and barren branches. She moved to Portland proper, the city's rain-slick streets a balm for her isolation, immersing in the art scene at galleries like Blue Sky and Laura Russo. Success came in fits. A solo show here, a commission there. But each sold piece felt like a piece of her soul too, bartered for the hollow echo of Riley's absence. One gray afternoon, 3 years after the fire, a package arrived at Evelyn's Pearl District loft. Inside was a manila folder, clinical and cold. A letter from Riley's lawyer. She was marrying a colleague, a man named Theo, stable and kind, the kind of choice that promised roots without the risk of wild flames. "I love you, but this isn't sustainable," the note read, ink smudged as if by tears. "Forgive me for choosing safety over the burn." Evelyn burned it in her sink, the flames small and spiteful, watching the words curl to ash. The scar on her palm from that night, the one from gripping the beam too tight, throbbed like a fresh wound. She stopped painting for 6 months, her canvases gathering dust in the corner. Friends dragged her to readings at Powell's, to queer open mics at Q Center, but she moved through them like a ghost, her laughter a borrowed sound. Portland tried to heal her. The city's pulse, farmers' markets bursting with marionberries, craft breweries humming with flannel-clad laughter, offered distractions. She dated sporadically. A barista with tattooed wrists. A sculptor whose hands were gentle but uninspired. None lingered. The fire had marked her, not just in memory but in marrow. A reminder that love could consume as easily as it warmed. By 35, Evelyn had rebuilt, brick by careful brick. Her work evolved, shifting from destruction's fury to subtle regenerations. Fields of lupin reclaiming scorched earth, rivers carving canyons into stone. She curated for local collectives, mentored young queer artists at PNCA. The invitation to her first major gallery opening arrived like a hesitant sunrise. Evelyn Harper Fractured Light, at the Mark Woolley Gallery in the East Side Industrial District. It was a culmination, a declaration that she had survived not just the flames, but the slow burn of abandonment. As the date approached, Evelyn paced her studio, the loft overlooking the steel bridge where freighters glided like steel specters on the Willamette. Rain pattered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the city lights into halos. She adjusted a canvas, one depicting a lone figure emerging from smoke into dawn's tentative glow. "This is for you," she murmured to the empty room, though she no longer knew who you was, Riley herself or the girl who'd believed in forever. The opening loomed, a threshold she both craved and feared. Friends buzzed around her preparations. June, her wiry-haired gallerist with a penchant for vintage fedoras, barking orders at caterers. Lydia, the photographer friend whose lens captured Portland's underbelly, snapping candids of Evelyn in her element. "You're glowing, Ev," Lydia said, adjusting her camera strap. Evelyn forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Glowing? Perhaps. But beneath it, embers smoldered, waiting for a breath to reignite. Little did she know that breath was already en route, carried on the wings of a woman whose face had haunted her dreams for over a decade. The woman she had saved from fire, now returning not as a memory, but as flesh and bone, ready to set her soul ablaze once more. The gallery thrummed with the low hum of Portland's creative elite, voices weaving through the air like threads in a loom. Crystal glasses clinked against lips stained with Pinot Noir, laughter bubbling up from clusters around the sculptures in the corner. Evelyn stood at the periphery, her emerald eyes scanning the room from behind a veil of auburn waves. She wore a tailored black blazer over a silk blouse the color of fogged glass, her freckled hands clasped around a stemless wine glass to steady the tremor she refused to name. This was her night, her fractured light laid bare on the walls, yet it felt like standing naked in a storm, exposed, windswept, bracing for the next gust. June swept by, her fedora tilted at a jaunty angle, trailing the scent of patchouli and success. "Darling Mingle. That collector from Seattle is eyeing the triptych." Evelyn nodded, murmuring assurances, but her feet rooted to the polished concrete floor. The paintings loomed behind her. Vast expanses of canvas where blues bled into golds, symbols of rebirth she had willed into existence through sleepless nights. Each stroke a therapy, each layer a letting go. Or so she told herself. She drifted toward the window, where rain traced silver paths down the glass, mirroring the Willamette's restless flow below. The east side pulsed beyond. Food carts steaming under yellow awnings, cyclists dodging puddles on bike lanes lined with blooming rhododendrons. Portland in November was a study in melancholy grace, skies heavy with promise of clearance. Evelyn pressed her palm to the cool pane, the scar tissue a faint ridge against the smooth surface. 12 years. How many lifetimes packed into those drops? A murmur rippled through the crowd, heads turning toward the entrance. Evelyn followed their gaze, her breath catching like a snag in wool. There, framed in the doorway, stood Riley Voss. Older, yes, but unmistakably her. The chestnut curls now tamed into loose waves that grazed her shoulders, hazel eyes sharpened by time's quiet chisel. She wore a wool coat the color of autumn leaves, unbuttoned to reveal a simple emerald dress that hugged her frame with effortless poise. No longer the wide-eyed botanist in a sundress, but a woman who carried the forest's depth in her stride. Riley's gaze swept the room, landing on Evelyn with the precision of a compass finding true north. For a heartbeat the gallery faded, the chatter, the jazz quartet in the alcove, the flicker of track lighting on oiled wood. It was just them again, mud-streaked and alive, the world narrowed to the space between two souls long sundered. Evelyn's glass slipped from numb fingers, shattering on the floor in a spray of crimson shards and wine. The sound yanked her back, head swiveling, June materializing with a broom and a concerned frown. "Ev? You all right?" Evelyn knelt, gathering fragments, her cheeks burning hotter than the fire she'd fled. "Fine." Clumsy. But her voice cracked, a fissure widening. Riley approached then, weaving through the guests with the grace of someone who navigated root systems and regrets alike. Up close, the changes were intimate. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes, like tributaries feeding a greater river. A silver thread in her curls, catching the light like dew on moss. She stopped a respectful distance away, hands clasped before her, knuckles white. "Evelyn," she said, the name a soft exhalation, laced with Vermont's rolling hills. The room's din receded further, a tide pulling back to reveal sunken treasures. Evelyn rose slowly, shards glinting at her feet like fallen stars. "Riley." It came out steady, a lie armored in calm. Inside, her pulse thundered, a cascade of questions tumbling. Why now? Why here? Why after the silence that had carved canyons in her chest? "I saw the listing in the Oregonian. Your show." Riley's eyes darted to the nearest canvas, a depiction of embers cooling into fertile soil, then back. "I had to come. After all this time. I needed to see you." Evelyn's laugh was brittle, a leaf skittering across pavement. "See me? Or the girl who played hero once?" The words escaped sharper than intended, honed on years of what-ifs. She gestured vaguely at the art, a deflection. "These are the ghosts we make of ourselves. Welcome to the haunt." Riley flinched, a microcosm of fracture, but held her ground. "It's more than that. You're extraordinary." Her voice dipped, intimate, drawing Evelyn in despite the walls she'd built. "I never stopped following your work. Clippings in a drawer, links bookmarked. But seeing it, it's like breathing after holding it too long." The quartet shifted to a slower melody, Coltrane's melancholy saxophone curling through the space. Guests milled closer, oblivious, but Evelyn felt exposed, as if the paintings whispered their shared history to anyone who looked. She wanted to flee, to the rain-slick streets, to the anonymity of a dive bar on Burnside, but her feet betrayed her, rooted by the gravity of Riley's presence. "Come," Evelyn said abruptly, turning toward a quieter wing where her largest piece hung. A mural-scale work of a figure silhouetted against a dawn horizon, arms outstretched to catch the first rays. It was her favorite, born from that meadow night, though she'd never admitted it aloud. Riley followed, their shoulders nearly brushing, the air between them charged like the hush before thunder. They stood before it, the painting's glow bathing their faces in warm amber. "This one's called Embers to Aurora," Evelyn murmured, tracing the air above the canvas. "Light doesn't erase the burn. It refracts through it." Riley studied it, her profile a study in quiet intensity. "It's you. The way you pulled me out that night. Not just from the fire but from myself." She turned, hazel meeting emerald, and in that collision, the years dissolved like mist under sun. "I broke us, Evelyn. I chose fear over the flame we had. And I've carried that ash every day since." Evelyn's throat tightened, memories flooding. The taste of Riley's kiss under starlight, the curve of her smile in morning light, the gut-wrench of that lawyer's letter. "Carried it? You left it all behind. A life in Vermont, a husband, Theo, was it? Safety in picket fences and tenure tracks." The bitterness seeped through unbidden, a poison she'd thought purged. Riley's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the sheen of truths long buried. "Theo was steady, but he was never home, not really. We divorced 5 years ago. No children, no drama. Just two people realizing we'd built a house without a hearth." She paused, swallowing. "I left academia after. Started a nursery in Burlington, specializing in native plants. Healing the land, I suppose, as penance for not healing us." Penance. The word hung heavy. A stone skipped across still water. Evelyn crossed her arms, a barrier against the pull. "And now? What brings you across the country? Into my gallery like some spectral return." Riley reached into her coat pocket, withdrawing a small charred journal. Its cover warped, pages brittle. I found it in storage last month. Your sketches tucked inside. The ones you drew of the ferns, of me. She held it out, an offering. I came to return it. And to say, I'm sorry. For the silence. For choosing easy over eternal. Evelyn took it, fingers brushing Riley's, the contact a spark jumping live wire. The journal smelled of smoke and sage, a time capsule. Flipping it open, she traced a faded drawing. Riley laughing amid lupins, her form alive with joy. You kept this. Her voice softened, the armor cracking. Like a heart, Riley whispered, beating in the dark. The gallery's energy shifted then. A wave of applause for the toast June was giving at the podium. Evelyn closed the journal, tucking it against her chest. Stay, she said, the word slipping free like a breath held too long. After this, coffee at the tin shed. Or the river walk. Anywhere but here with eyes on us. Riley's smile bloomed, tentative as first light. I'd like that. As the night wore on, Evelyn navigated the crowd with Riley at her side, an anchor in the swirl. Introductions blurred. Lydia snapping photos, cooing over their serendipitous reunion. A curator from Seattle probing Riley's plant expertise, oblivious to the undercurrent. But beneath the pleasantries, tension coiled. A wire stretched taut between what was and what might be. By closing time, the rain had eased to a drizzle, streetlights haloing the pavement in liquid gold. They stepped out onto Grand Avenue, the city exhaling around them. Evelyn's loft was a 10-minute walk, but she led them east instead, toward the Willamette's edge where cottonwoods shed golden leaves like confetti. The path was slick, forcing closeness. Their arms brushed, sending ripples through Evelyn's resolve. You've changed, Evelyn said finally, as they paused by a bench overlooking the dark water. Freighters hooted in the distance, ghosts on the current. Stronger. Like the oaks that bend but don't break. Riley leaned against the railing, wind tousling her curls. Grief does that. Theo's leaving was quiet, but it unearthed everything. The fire you, the parts of me I buried to fit. She turned, vulnerability etching her features. I thought distance would dull it. But Portland. Your light. It called me back. Evelyn's heart ached, a sweet bruise. And if it's too late? If the embers are cold? Riley stepped closer, her hand finding Evelyn's scarred palm, lacing fingers with deliberate care. Then we kindle new ones. Together. The kiss, when it came, was not the fervent spark of youth, but a slow unfurling, seasoned by sorrow and survival. Lips met soft, tentative, tasting of wine and wistful rain. Evelyn pulled back first, forehead to forehead, breaths mingling in the chill air. One step, she murmured. That's all I can promise. Riley nodded, her smile a beacon. One step is where we started. But dawn brought the fracture's echo. Evelyn woke in her loft to Riley's note on the kitchen island. Coffee at yours turned into this. Last night was real. But I have a flight tomorrow back to wrap things in Burlington. Give me time to untangle roots. Call me. Our attached was a pressed fern frond, delicate and enduring. Evelyn traced the veins, a map of possibility. The city stirred below, rain clearing to reveal blue skies fractured by clouds. She picked up her phone, hesitating, then texted. Roots take time, but they grow deep. Come back when you're ready. As she set to work in her studio, brush in hand, Evelyn felt the stirrings of something nascent. A light not borrowed but born anew. Yet doubt lingered, a shadow at the edge, whispering of fires that could consume again. Winter settled over Portland like a heavy quilt, muffling the city's edges in frost-kissed quiet. Evelyn's loft became a cocoon, canvases leaning against walls like silent confidants, the air thick with turpentine and the faint, lingering scent of Riley's wool coat, left behind in the haste of dawn's departure. Days blurred into weeks, marked by the reliable rhythm of the Willamette's tide, and the unpredictable pulse of her heart. She threw herself into commissions. A mural for a new queer youth center in Southeast, portraits of elders from the local Maka community, whose stories wove resilience into every line. Yet Riley's absence echoed louder than the rain's patter. The text came sporadically at first, photos of snow-dusted maples in Vermont, captions laced with wry humor. Burlington's version of your moody skies. Missed the real ones. Evelyn replied in kind, sharing snaps of her studio chaos. The way fog clung to the Hawthorne Bridge like unspoken longing. Come see it lift sometime. It was a dance, cautious steps across a chasm, each message a bridge plank laid with care. One evening, as sleet tapped Morse code against the windows, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a voice note. Riley's voice filled the room, warm as hearthfire despite the static crackle. "Hey Ev. Packed up the nursery today. Sold it to a young couple starting out, full of that fire we had. Feels right letting go. Heading west in a week. Got a lead on a greenhouse gig near Olympia. Closer. If you're open to it. Dinner when I hit Portland soil." The vulnerability threaded through, a raw edge that mirrored Evelyn's own guarded hope. She played it twice, 3 times, letting the words settle like sediment in a riverbed. Olympia was a ferry ride away, close enough for weekends, far enough for breaths between. Evelyn's fingers hovered over the record button, then pressed. "Dinner sounds like a beginning. Bring your stories. I'll bring mine." The interim stretched, taut as a bowstring. Evelyn walked the waterfront trails, where bare willows arched over the path like skeletal lovers, their branches laced with hoarfrost. She thought of the fire often now, not as devastation but as alchemy, the way destruction had forged them, however briefly. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a single act, but a season's turning. Leaves falling to nourish the soil for spring's return. Riley arrived on a blustery March afternoon, the city awakening in tentative greens. Evelyn met her at the Union Station platform, heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Riley stepped off the Amtrak, duffel slung over one shoulder, curls windswept and wild. No coat this time. Just a knit sweater the color of sage, jeans tucked into boots caked with East Coast mud. Their embrace was fierce, bodies remembering the fit despite the year's interlude. They chose a hole in the wall on Alberta Street, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus boasting farm-to-table comfort. Over bowls of nettle soup and plates of roasted beets drizzled in hazelnut oil, they unpacked the unpacked. Riley spoke of the divorce's quiet unraveling, shared silences over dinner tables, Theo's gentle insistence that they both deserved more. "He knew about you," she admitted, stirring her tea. "From the beginning. Said I carried your light like a lantern in fog. Scared him, I think. And me." Evelyn nodded, fork pausing mid-air. "I carried you too. In every stroke, every empty bed. Thought it was grief, but it was waiting. Unknowing." Riley's hand crossed the table, palm up, an invitation. Evelyn took it, scars aligning like puzzle pieces. "Tell me about the greenhouse," she said, steering toward safer waters. Riley's eyes lit, animation flushing her cheeks. "It's a co-op, focused on heirloom seeds and pollinator habitats. We'll propagate salal and Oregon grape, plants that thrive in your wild edges." She leaned in, voice dropping. "But mostly it's a chance to root where I want. Near you." The meal stretched into hours, the bistro emptying around them, candle flames dancing shadows on the walls. They wandered afterward to Overlook Park, the city lights twinkling below like a sprawl of fireflies. Spring's breath stirred the air, carrying scents of damp earth and distant cherry blossoms. Riley slipped her arm through Evelyn's, a casual intimacy that felt earned. "You're healing me already," Evelyn confessed, as they paused by a gnarled oak, its bark etched with lovers' initials faded by time. "But it's terrifying. Like standing too close to the flame again." Riley turned, cupping Evelyn's face with hands that smelled of soil and possibility. "Then we tend it carefully. No rushing the burn." Their kiss was deeper this time, a conversation of lips and sighs, the world narrowing to the press of bodies and the river's murmur. In the weeks that followed, they built tentatively, like architects sketching blueprints on napkins. Weekends in Olympia. Evelyn ferrying over, laden with sketchpads and takeout from Pine State biscuits. They'd hike the Capitol Forest, Riley pointing out trillium blooms pushing through leaf litter, Evelyn capturing them in quick charcoals. Evenings in Riley's rented cottage, a clapboard haven overlooking Butt Inlet, where they cooked risotto with foraged mushrooms, wine loosening tongues for tales of what could have beens. Evelyn shared her vulnerabilities, the panic attacks that gripped her in the dead of night, echoes of abandonment's grip. The way her mother's letters from Providence still arrived monthly, filled with clippings of local news and unsubtle hints about finding someone steady. Riley listened, her presence a balm, countering with her own fractures. The guilt of her mother's bedside vigils abandoned for fieldwork, the isolation of academia's ivory tower. One Sunday, as rain lashed the cottage windows, they tackled the journal together. Spread on the kitchen table amid mugs of chamomile, its pages revealed not just sketches, but Evelyn's marginalia. Poems scrawled in faded ink, fragments like "Your eyes hold the forest's secret green," and "In your laugh, I hear the rivers bend." Riley traced them, tears welling. "You saw me truly, before I saw myself." Evelyn pulled her close, chin resting on Riley's crown. "And you saw the hero in the mess. That's why it hurt so much when you left." Riley nodded against her chest. "I was afraid of my own wildness. Thought love like ours would consume me, like the fire almost did." She pulled back, eyes fierce. "But I've learned. The burn clears space for new growth." Their lovemaking that night was a revelation, not of urgency but of reverence. Bodies mapping familiar terrains with fresh wonder, touches lingering like sunlight on bark. No haste, just the slow weave of limbs and whispers, sealing promises in the sacred quiet. Yet shadows lingered, insidious as undergrowth. Distance tested them. Midweek calls cut short by Riley's early shifts, Evelyn's deadlines pulling her into all-nighters. A cancelled ferry due to gales left Evelyn alone in her loft, staring at a blank canvas, doubt creeping like ivy. "What if this is just nostalgia's trick?" she voiced to June over beers at the Jupiter. June, ever the sage in her fedora, clinked her pint. "Nostalgia's a spark. Love's the steady flame. Tend it or let it go. But don't borrow trouble from tomorrow." Emboldened, Evelyn drove north unannounced one Friday, arriving at the greenhouse as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples. Riley was knee-deep in pots, dirt-streaked and radiant, directing volunteers on transplanting foxgloves. Her surprise bloomed into a grin that lit the gloaming. "You came. Couldn't wait for the fairy's whim." Evelyn helped pack up, their hands brushing in the soil bins, earth grounding the intangible. That night, over takeout pho steaming on the coffee table, Riley broached the deeper wound. "I need to tell you about the silence. After the wedding, I convinced myself it was mercy sparing you the mess. But it was cowardice. I stalked your shows online, saw you thriving, and it twisted the knife. Thought you'd moved on, found someone who wouldn't falter." Evelyn set down her chopsticks, the steam curling like ghosts. "I did move on. Pieces of me did. But the core? It waited, Riley. Forgave without knowing it." Tears traced Riley's cheeks, silver in the lamplight. "Can you forgive the rest? The years lost?" Evelyn drew her into an embrace, the scent of earth and citrus enveloping. "Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's planting over the scars. And look, we're sprouting." Spring deepened, their rhythm solidifying. Riley's greenhouse thrived, partnerships forming with Portland's community gardens. Evelyn's work flourished, a new series inspired by their hikes. Interwoven roots, explorations of entanglement and release. They hosted a joint event at the gallery, Riley leading a workshop on native flora, Evelyn unveiling paintings where human forms merged with leaf veins and river bends. But understanding demanded confrontation. On a hike through Tryon Creek State Park, where ferns carpeted the forest floor like emerald tapestries, Riley halted by a fallen log bridged with moss. "There's more," she said, voice steady but eyes stormy. "During the marriage, I tried to be straight-laced to fit. Dated women on the side discreetly. Guilt ate me alive. It wasn't fair to anyone." Evelyn sat beside her, the log cool beneath them. Birds trilled overhead, indifferent witnesses. "And Theo? He knew eventually. We opened up, but it was too late. The damage was done." Riley plucked a frond, twirling it absently. "I hurt you by leaving, then by living half a life. How do I make amends?" Evelyn considered the question, watching a squirrel dart through the understory. "By being here fully. No halves. And by letting me see your shadows too." Riley leaned her head on Evelyn's shoulder, the weight a welcome press. "Then see this. I'm all in. Roots and all." As they rose, hands clasped, Evelyn felt the thaw. A melting of old ice, water trickling toward greater flows. Forgiveness was not a destination, but a path, winding through thickets of truth toward clearer vistas. Back in Portland, under a canopy of starlit skies, They lay in Evelyn's bed. Windows open to the night symphony of distant traffic and rustling leaves. "What now?" Riley whispered, fingers tracing Evelyn's scar. "Now," Evelyn replied, turning to meet her gaze. "We grow." Summer arrived in Portland with a sigh, the Willamette shimmering under relentless blue as if the city had finally exhaled its winter burdens. Evelyn and Riley's worlds intertwined like vines scaling a trellis, each day a new tendril reaching toward sun. Weekends became rituals. Farmers' markets at PSU, baskets brimming with heirloom tomatoes and goat cheese from tiny farms in the Hood River Valley. Lazy afternoons at Oaks Amusement Park, where the carousel's calliope music mingled with their laughter, Riley's head on Evelyn's shoulder as the painted horses rose and fell. Evelyn's studio transformed under Riley's influence, shelves now lined with jars of dried lavender and sketchpads interspersed with Riley's field notes, diagrams of mycelial networks, annotations on symbiotic fungi. "Life's underground web," Riley explained one muggy evening, her bare feet tucked under her on the worn leather couch. "Invisible threads holding it all." Evelyn watched her, the way passion animated her features, and felt a profound gratitude swell. For this woman who had returned not as a specter, but as partner, coaxing her guarded heart into bloom. Yet understanding deepened only through the soil's darker layers. One August twilight, as they picnicked on the banks of the sandy river, blankets spread amid wild rye, cooler packed with chilled Sauvignon Blanc, Riley unearthed a thornier root. The sun dipped low, gilding the water in molten hues, dragonflies skimming the surface like whispered secrets. "I need to show you something," Riley said, her voice laced with the weight of withheld rain. From her backpack she withdrew a slim volume, its cover embossed with faded gold. A poetry chapbook, self-published a decade prior. Evelyn took it, the paper soft as aged skin. "Yours?" Riley nodded, hazel eyes fixed on the river's flow. "Wrote it during the early Vermont years. After you. It's raw." She opened to a marked page, reading aloud in a voice steady as stone yet trembling at the edges. "In the ash of what we torched, I plant my solitude/roots twisting toward your absent sun/fearing the green that might reclaim me." The words hung, poignant as the cry of a loon echoing from the far shore. Evelyn closed the book gently, setting it aside. "You grieved us too." It was statement, not question, laced with the ache of mutual loss. "Every stanza," Riley confessed, drawing her knees up. "I poured the fire into ink, thinking it would douse the burn. But it only smoldered deeper. That's why the silence, words failed me then, so I chose none." Evelyn shifted closer, the blankets weave imprinting patterns on her skin. "And now?" "With words between us again." Riley met her gaze, vulnerability a bridge. "Now I want to rewrite. Together." She paused, plucking a riverside daisy, its petals pale against her sun-browned fingers. "But first, truth, during those years I sought echoes of you and others. Women at conferences, brief connections that fizzled because they weren't. It made me question everything, my choices, my courage." The admission landed soft, not as accusation but as offering. Evelyn traced the daisy's stem, considering. "I did the same. Portland's scene is full of sparks but none caught like ours. Each one reminded me of what I'd lost, until I stopped looking." She lifted Riley's chin, thumb brushing a freckle like a constellation point. "Your shadows don't scare me. They've shaped you into this whole wise." Relief washed Riley's features, a tide receding to reveal smoother sands. "And yours?" "The anger I sense sometimes, in the way you hold back during arguments." Evelyn exhaled, the river's murmur underscoring her pause. "It's the scar's echo. That night I pulled you free, I vowed to protect what mattered. When you left it felt like failure. Like I'd saved you only to lose you to safer arms." Riley's hand found hers, lacing tight. "You didn't fail. You freed me to find my way back." They sat thus, daisy wilting between them, as the sky deepened to indigo, stars pricking through like promises. Forgiveness bloomed in such moments, petal by petal. They attended therapy together. A queer-affirming counselor in the Alphabet District, sessions in a sunlit room overlooking Lovejoy Fountain. Here they dissected the fire's metaphor, how trauma bonds could ignite or incinerate. Boundaries aren't walls, the therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Clara with silver-streaked braids, guided. They're the garden's edge, nurturing what's within. Evelyn learned to voice her fears without armor. The dread of abandonment resurfacing in Riley's late texts, the phantom ache when work pulled them apart. Riley, in turn, unpacked her flight response, rooted in a childhood of her father's early death, leaving her mother to navigate widowhood's wilds alone. "I run to control the loss," she admitted one session, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. Evelyn squeezed her hand, the gesture a silent vow, "Stay. We'll weather." These revelations wove empathy's tapestry, softening edges worn raw by time. They traveled south to the Oregon coast, renting a driftwood cottage in Cannon Beach where Haystack Rock loomed like a sentinel carved from ancient stone. Mornings they wandered tide pools, Riley identifying anemone's gentle sway, Evelyn sketching the interplay of wave and cliff. Evenings by the hearth, roasting marshmallows over flames tamed in a fire pit, they shared histories unburdened. "Tell me about your mother," Evelyn prompted one night. The ocean's roar a constant underscore. Salt air tangled their hair, firelight dancing on their faces. Riley poked the embers, sparks ascending like fleeting prayers. "She was a force, taught me to press flowers between book pages, to listen to the wind's stories. Cancer took her slow, but she fought with grace. Grow toward the light," she'd say. Her voice thickened. "I think that's why I chose Theo. Stability like she craved after Dad." Evelyn nodded, marshmallow gooey on her graham cracker. "Mine's the opposite, feisty Italian stock, still sewing curtains in Providence. She writes about that nice girl from church for me, oblivious." Laughter bubbled, easing the weight. "But she taught resilience. Mended what broke stitch by stitch." Riley leaned in, lips tasting of chocolate and sea brine. "We're mending now. You and me." Back in the city, their lives synced like gears finding purchase. Riley commuted for the greenhouse expansion, collaborating with Evelyn on an installation for the Portland Art Museum. Living sculptures where paintings intertwined with potted natives, symbolizing love's ecological dance. The opening drew crowds, critics praising the tender symbiosis. But for them it was personal, a public affirmation of private healing. Conflict arose, inevitable as seasonal storms. A weekend canceled when Riley's co-op faced funding cuts. Evelyn's frustration spilling into sharp words over a hurried phone call. "I need you here, not chasing crises." Riley's retort stung. "And I need space to build this without feeling like a tether." Silence followed, a chasm reopening. Evelyn walked it off along the esplanade, autumn leaves crunching underfoot, Portland's fleeting gold before the deluge. By the trail's end, clarity settled. Love demanded space, not suffocation. She texted, "I'm sorry. Your roots matter. Let's talk when the storm passes." They met at a neutral ground, the Japanese garden in Washington Park, where maples shed crimson carpets and koi glided in zen ponds. Amid the tranquility, apologies flowed easy. "I forget sometimes," Evelyn said, feeding a fish a pellet that vanished in ripples, "that protecting means trusting, not holding tighter." Riley slipped an arm around her waist. "And I forget that your fire isn't mine to douse. It's what drew me back." From there they cultivated rituals of reconnection. Weekly embers checks. Walks where they'd voice gratitudes. Riley for Evelyn's steady gaze during her doubts. Evelyn for Riley's hand in hers through creative droughts. Empathy became their compass, guiding through fog. As leaves turned, they hosted a harvest dinner at the loft. June with her latest paramour, Lydia capturing candids, a spread of acorn squash bisque and wild mushroom tart from Riley's foraging hauls. Laughter filled the space, toasts raised to roots rediscovered. Later, as guests departed into the crisp night, Evelyn and Riley stood at the window, city aglow below. "You're my light," Riley murmured, cheek against Evelyn's. "And you're the soil that holds it." Evelyn turned, kissing her temple. "We've understood each other finally. Scars and all." In that understanding, forgiveness rooted deep, a perennial promising blooms through every season. Autumn's palette deepened over Portland, the city's veins pulsing with harvest fairs and the earthy perfume of decaying leaves. Evelyn felt the shift within her too, a rebirth stirring, not a sudden epiphany, but as the gradual unfurling of a bulb long dormant. Her studio brimmed with new energy, canvases alive with bolder strokes, figures entwined with flora, bodies blooming from barren earth, colors vibrant as arterial blood. Regeneration, she titled the series, each piece a testament to the alchemy of ruin and renewal. Riley's presence amplified it, her greenhouse yielding bounty that infiltrated their days. Bouquets of goldenrod on the kitchen counter, tinctures of echinacea steeping in jars by the sink. They moved in tandem now, a quiet domesticity laced with wonder. Mornings blending smoothies with kale from the co-op, evenings curled on the couch with dog-eared copies of Robin Wall Kimmerer, discussing braiding sweetgrass into art and life. Rebirth began in the small reclamations. Evelyn tackled the loft's neglected corner, once a graveyard of unfinished works from her barren years. With Riley's encouragement, she hauled out the oldest canvas, a stormy seascape born of Riley's departure, waves crashing in chaotic grays. What if we repaint it together? Riley suggested, sleeves rolled up, palette knife in hand. They did, over a rainy Sunday, jazz murmuring from the speakers. Riley added verdant undercurrents, greens bleeding into the foam, while Evelyn layered dawn pinks across the horizon. See, Riley said, stepping back, paint smudged on her cheek like war paint. The storm births the calm. Evelyn wiped the streak with her thumb, lingering. You birth it in me. The canvas became their first collaboration, hung prominently, from tempest to tether. Emboldened, Evelyn enrolled in a somatic therapy workshop at Bodyvox, learning to release the fire's somatic echoes, the tension coiling in her shoulders like phantom smoke, the shallow breaths mimicking that night's panic. Riley joined one session, her own bodywork uncovering grief's knots from her mother's passing. It's like pruning, Riley shared afterward, as they soaked in the loft's clawfoot tub, steam rising like incense. Cut away the deadwood to let light in. Evelyn traced the suds on Riley's collarbone, water lapping gentle. And what grows in its place? Riley turned, water sloshing, eyes alight. Us. Stronger. Their intimacy evolved too, a renaissance of touch. No longer tentative bridges but bold explorations, hands mapping scars with reverence, lips charting paths of rediscovered desire. In the hush of pre-dawn, Evelyn would wake to Riley's fingers weaving through her hair, pulling her into slow dances of skin and sigh. It was sacred, this reclaiming. Bodies as canvases, each caress a stroke erasing old erasures. Professionally, doors swung wide. The Mark Woolley Gallery extended Evelyn's show into a traveling exhibit, landing spots in Seattle and San Francisco. Riley's co-op secured a grant for urban greening projects, partnering with Evelyn's Youth Center mural. Together, they pitched a joint residency in the Cascades, 2 months at an artist enclave near the fire's old site, a deliberate return to Genesis. Packing for the trip, Evelyn unearthed the charred journal again, its pages now a touchstone. We'll add to it, she declared, flipping to a blank section. Riley grinned, producing inks and quills from her bag. Poems and petals. The drive up was a pilgrimage, Highway 26 winding through ponderosa pines that whispered of endurance. They stopped at viewpoints, picnicking on cheese and figs, toasting with thermoses of mulled cider to second chances. Arriving at the enclave, a cluster of cedar cabins nestled in a meadow ringed by peaks, felt like stepping into a held breath's release. Their shared space overlooked the burned scar, now a tapestry of regrowth. Fireweed pinks mingling with lodgepole saplings, nature's defiant palette. Days blurred into creative fever. Evelyn painted en plein air, capturing the site's layered histories, charred stumps cradling wild strawberries, light-piercing canopy gaps like healing wounds. Riley foraged and documented, pressing specimens beside Evelyn's sketches, a collaborative journal blooming with hybrid entries, poem overlaid on leaf vein, watercolor bleeding into botanical diagram. Evenings by the communal fire pit, they shared with fellow residents. A queer composer from Eugene scoring symphonies of wind and water, a dancer weaving movements inspired by mycelium spread. Stories flowed, vulnerabilities aired like laundry on the line. One night, under a meteor shower streaking the velvet dome, Riley pulled Evelyn aside to the meadow's edge. This place, she said, gesturing to the starlit scar. It's where I died and was reborn. Because of you. Evelyn drew her close, the night's chill nipping at their wool wraps. And where I learned to rise from my own ashes. They made love there on a bed of wild grass, the cosmos witnessing. A union of earth and ether, fierce and tender. Challenges tempered the idyll. A storm rolled in mid-residency, gales howling like unresolved specters, knocking out power and stirring Evelyn's old terrors. She paced the cabin, flashlight beam jittering shadows, pulse racing with memories of crackling beams and choking smoke. Riley found her by the window, rain lashing like accusations. "Breathe with me," she urged, guiding Evelyn to the floor, palms pressed to the cool planks. "Feel the ground. It's holding us." Inhalations synced, ragged to rhythmic, Evelyn's panic ebbed like receding flood. "I thought I'd conquered it," she gasped, tears hot on her cheeks. Riley gathered her, rocking gentle. "Conquering's a myth. It's carrying with grace." They talked through the night, Evelyn voicing the fire's unspoken toll. Nightmares of failing Riley, the guilt of surviving unscathed while others lost homes to wildfires. Riley listened, then shared her parallel haunt, the survivor's guilt of walking from flames whole, only to fracture later. Dawn broke clear, the storm's gift. A rainbow arching over the peaks, mist rising from the meadow like steam from a cooling forge. They hiked to the old cabin site, now a viewpoint plaque commemorating resilience. Standing amid the regreened expanse, Evelyn scattered wildflower seeds from her pocket, columbine and paintbrush, symbols of return. "For the girl we were," she said. Riley added her own handful, tears mingling with soil. "And the women we are." Back in Portland, the residency's harvest ripened. Evelyn's exhibit opening at the residency's partner gallery drew acclaim. Her pieces, infused with the scar's spirit, resonating as a queer ode to ecological and emotional rebirth. Riley's documentation became a zine, distributed at the event, its pages a love letter to intertwined lives. Privately, rebirth manifested in commitment's quiet forms. They adopted a rescue dog, a wiry mutt named Sage with one blue eye, who bounded through their routines like liquid joy. Holidays approached with tentative plans. Thanksgiving at Evelyn's mother's in Providence, a bridge to fold families into the weave. "She'll adore you," Evelyn promised, as they decorated the loft with pine boughs and fairy lights. Fierce women recognized their own. Riley laughed, hanging an ornament shaped like a fern. "And your siblings? The protective sisters. They'll grill you on intentions. But pass with flying colors, you're the real deal." As snow dusted the city, they volunteered at the youth center, Evelyn leading art circles on scars as stories, Riley facilitating plantings in the rooftop garden. Watching kids, queer and questioning, blossom under their guidance mirrored Evelyn's inner shift. From survivor to sage, wounds transmuted to wisdom. One crystalline night, bundled on the balcony overlooking the twinkling bridges, Evelyn turned to Riley, sage curled at their feet. "This is rebirth. Not erasing the fire, but letting it fertilize everything after." Riley's kiss was affirmation, warm against the frost. "Our eternal spring." In that moment Evelyn felt the full bloom, soul alight, not in blaze but in sustained glow. Winter's grip loosened as the new year dawned, Portland emerging from its chrysalis into spring's verdant embrace. Cherry blossoms lined the streets like pink confetti, and the Willamette ran high with meltwater, carrying the promise of fresher currents. For Evelyn Harper, the light felt not just returned but amplified. A radiant core pulsing through her days, illuminating corners long dimmed. Her rebirth, once a solitary climb from ashes, now shone communal, refracted through Riley's unwavering orbit. The year unfolded in luminous chapters. Their residency zine evolved into a full exhibit at PNC, Roots and Radiance, blending Evelyn's paintings with Riley's interactive installations, visitors tracing paths through living walls of ferns, pausing to journal reflections on resilience. Opening night buzzed with energy. Students from the youth center beaming in thrifted finery, June toasting with vintage champagne, Lydia's photos capturing the ether. "You've built a legacy," a young artist told Evelyn, eyes wide. "Healing in color and leaf." Evelyn glanced at Riley across the room, directing a cluster around a pollination diorama. Her laughter a melody cutting the din. "Legacy, yes, but shared." a tapestry woven from two looms. Spring brought crossings, the Providence trip, a whirlwind of Italian feasts and familial scrutiny. Evelyn's mother, Rosa, with her sharp wit and flour-dusted aprons, enveloped Riley in hugs that smelled of garlic and home. "You saved my girl from herself," Rosa confided over espresso, her accent thick as marinara. "I see it in her eyes light again." The sisters, Mia and Tessa, grilled as predicted, but Riley's tales of botanical wonders won them over, ending in late-night board games and vows of future visits. Back west, Riley's family folded in gently, a video call with her aunt in Burlington, heir to her mother's gardens, who gifted seeds of heirloom hollyhocks. "Plant them together," the aunt urged. "Roots honor the past." They did, in window boxes on the loft balcony, Sage digging enthusiastic holes as they laughed through the soil. Summer's warmth invited expansion. Evelyn accepted an adjunct role at PNCA, teaching narrative and nature, her syllabus infused with Riley's insights. Riley's co-op launched a satellite plot in Portland's Buckman neighborhood, a community haven where neighbors gathered for seed swaps and storytelling circles. Their evenings wove these threads. Dinner parties with mismatched plates, menus blending Rosa's recipes with Vermont farmstand fare, eggplant parmigiana alongside maple-glazed carrots. Light manifested in the mundane miracles. Mornings, Evelyn woke to Riley's coffee brewing, the aroma mingling with Sage's tail thumps. They'd linger at the island, planning hikes to Multnomah Falls or kayaks on the Clackamas, bodies attuned in easy grace. Intimacy deepened, a constant dawn, touches that spoke volumes, nights where words dissolved into the symphony of shared breath. Yet the glow honored shadows, integrating rather than eclipsing. Anniversary of the fire approached, mid-July, the Cascades shimmering in heat haze. They returned to the site, not as pilgrims to pain, but celebrants of survival. Picnic spread on the meadow, wild berry pie from foraged huckleberries, a bottle of Willamette Valley Pinot. Sage chased butterflies while they read from the journal, now a thick tome of their evolving chronicle. Evelyn's poems beside Riley's pressed specimens, collaborative vignettes of storms weathered. "To the blaze that birthed us," Riley toasted, glasses clinking crystalline. "And the light that sustains," Evelyn echoed, pulling her close. They made love in the grass as dusk fell, the horizon ablaze in their namesake, a union transcendent, souls entwined, eternal as the encircling pines. Fall brought accolades. Evelyn's series acquired by the Tacoma Art Museum, Riley keynoting at a national botany conference on queer ecologies of care. They traveled together to the event in D.C., cherry-picking exhibits at the Smithsonian, hands clasped in throngs of tourists. "This is us," Evelyn whispered in the Hirshhorn's modern wing, before a sculpture of interlocking forms, interwoven, unbreakable. Winter circled back, softer now, snow blanketing the city in hush. They hosted solstice gatherings, lanterns strung across the loft, friends sharing toasts to perseverance. June announced her engagement. Lydia debuted a photo book on Portland's resilient queer spaces. Evelyn and Riley gracing its cover, arms around each other amid lupin fields. As the year waned, they dreamed bigger. A joint cabin purchase in the Hood River Valley, a retreat for art and earth. Space to grow old wild, Riley mused, sketching floor plans on napkins. Evelyn smiled, tracing her beloved's hand. Wild and wise. On New Year's Eve, balcony aglow with string lights, they stood wrapped in a shared quilt, Sage snoring at their feet. Fireworks bloomed over the river, cascades of gold and crimson mirroring inner fires tamed to hearth. "1 year since you lit me again," Evelyn said, voice husky with wonder. Riley turned, hazel eyes reflecting the display. "And a lifetime to keep the flame." Their kiss sealed it, deep and sure, the city's heartbeat syncing with theirs. No grand finale but an open horizon, light perpetual, love the enduring dawn. In the quiet after, Evelyn felt the story's arc complete. From wound to wholeness, a lesbian odyssey of healing, where the woman once saved from fire had, in returning, redeemed them both. The soul once singed now shone unshadowed, a beacon for whatever tempests lay ahead. And in that radiance they walked on, hands clasped, toward infinities yet unpainted.